Welcome to Career Tools. This week, director level interview questions. The questions this class answers are: how are interview questions different at director level? And how do I prepare for director level interview questions?
Hey folks, this is Mark, reminding you yet again that if you're not a licensee of our work, you're missing out pretty seriously. The podcasts are free. The audio will always be free. We want you to benefit, even if you don't want a relationship with us, but you're missing an awful lot. To become a licensee, it's only $200 a year. You get access to the entire archive of our show notes, every single show we've ever done, in white paper format, so you can save time. You don't have to listen to the whole cast. You can read the cast, all available online 24/7. You also get access to our interviewing series, probably our most popular digital product of all time. Sold tens of thousands of them. And normally I think that costs $150, but we're throwing it into the $200 license because so many people love it so much. We also get access to executive tools, which even if you're an individual contributor, you probably ought to know how your executives are thinking and what energizes them relative to their responsibilities. I hope you'll consider becoming a licensee. It also helps us spread the gospel about management all over the world.
So director level positions are really different to other managerial positions in the company. A director in our terms manages managers, so we call them directors. Sometimes we call them executives because that's what they're called in corporate America. So we're talking about anybody who is a manager of managers or above. And we know those positions are different. There's more strategy, there's more collaboration, there's more outside activity than inside activity. There's less of sitting in front of your laptop and more of going out and having meetings. There's more working with people outside the company and less of working with people inside the company. There's less doing of work and more of, directing work. And because of that, people often expect that the interview questions will be different at that level. And they therefore ask us, hey, how do I prepare for a director level interview? And then they're surprised that we tell them the questions are exactly the same. So in this class, we're going to explain why they're the same and how you prepare.
Yeah, our outline for today is, number one, the same questions, but different answers. Number two is prepare answers to questions about leadership, prepare answers to questions about finance, and prepare answers to questions about strategy.
So we could make this guidance really short, which is go to the interviewing series, which you can either get by buying a personal license on Manager Tools, or you can buy the interview series on its own. Go through it. In it, there's something called the General Store exercise, which helps you work out your skills and abilities and traits from your experience. And then it helps you create interview answers from those experiences. Do everything else the interview series says, and you'll be set. We could make it that short. But that's probably pretty unexpected for anybody who's listening, who's getting ready for a director level interview. They were thinking, I thought it was going to be more complicated than that. And there isn't some secret, in order to get the key to the executive bathroom, I have to know this secret thing. There really isn't. It really is that simple in the sense of preparing for any interview.
The way that I like to say it is there's no silver bullet because we're not dealing with werewolves, right? I mean,
nice.
We know what we're up against here.
That's really true. And part of the reason is that because the balance of work changes, but the work really doesn't change. So sure, you're dealing with people and getting people to do things more than doing it yourself, but that's the same work that you do as a manager or as an individual contributor. You're just doing way more of it. So that's why the questions don't change. It's the same work, just a different balance. So we pulled out some questions from Glassdoor where people can post the questions they were asked in interviews, and we pulled out some of the director level ones, right, Andrew?
Yeah, and it's interesting, right? So some of the questions we saw were, how have you handled working with a difficult person? What is your management style? Tell me what strategies you would employ to turn around a department with declining sales. Tell me about something you have accomplished that you are really proud of. Why are you interested in this position? How do you collaborate with other departments? As an IT user, what was the most serious technical issue you faced and how was it addressed? How have you built bridges and helped facilitate siloed departments to work together? Tell me about office politics you've been involved with and how you handled it. You're probably surprised that those questions are very similar to questions that either you have been asked or you have seen asked at a lower level in terms of your organization or job level. The reason the questions are the same is that the requirements are really the same. I mean, we had requirements, or we did the same exercise looking at requirements for just random job ads for an executive, right, Wendy?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So one of them was dynamic, positive attitude, self-directed, entrepreneurial, high integrity, individual with enthusiasm for the mission and a tenacity for success. Strength in operational management, budgeting, and financial management practices. Excellent people skills, responsive and prompt. Excellence in management with the ability to guide staff, manage team, and develop strategic work plans. Solutions-driven and action-oriented visionary. You can tell that people never read job descriptions out loud because they put really difficult words together.
It's written like a marketing, like it's very like.
Well, that's what a job ad is. It's marketing.
Right.
It's like, come take my job. Where was I? Solutions-driven and action-oriented visionary with the ability to convey big picture goals and also get things done. Strong written and verbal communication and presentation skills. I think that one is in every single job description of a professional, they call white collar job. Every single one. Strong written and verbal communication. It's always on there. Knowledgeable of politics and the sensitivities of its processes and willing to be a regular resource to local decision makers and their staff. Inclusive, attuned to a broad set of audiences and open to all perspectives, and the capacity to understand cultural differences and the ability to diplomatically seek common ground and build bridges for success.
The requirements might be broader than the requirements for a manager. The job description mentions community involvement, financial oversight, program development, and recruitment. The requirements are not that much different.
Right. A manager wouldn't do all of those things. They might be, they would have strong written and verbal communication and presentation skills, but they might not be asked to do finance and operational and working with communities. A manager would probably only do one of those or two of them. So it's broader, but it's essentially the same work. If you're a financial manager, then budgeting and financial management practices are your bread and butter, and therefore the questions are the same because it's essentially the same work again.
The way that I think about it, Wendy, and tell me if I'm wrong, is that the requirement is the same. It's the scope that could change, right? I mean, that's the way I think about it, is the scope.
Yeah. That's exactly it. Now, any manager role will say excellent people skills, solution-driven, action-oriented, even if it's not those exact words.
Right. But there's only one effective way to discover if a candidate has the skills you need, and that's to ask a behavioral interview question. For example, in this role, you'll be dealing with a variety of people. Can you tell me about a time when you've dealt with a wide range of people like this and what strategies you've used to be successful? That question isn't any different for a customer service representative who deals with a range of customers to a business than it is for an executive role where the range might be customers, donors, the board, other community groups, politicians, government officials, government agencies, amongst others.
Yeah, wide range for the customer service rep themselves is one definition of range, I guess. And then for an executive, it's much more scope, but it's still it's the same question. How did you deal with a wide range of people?
It's relative, right? It's relative to the scope of the role. What is different is the answer, in the sense that the experience that you have when you're interviewing for an executive level role is different than if you were interviewing for a role managing customer service reps or even the customer service reps role itself.
So in order to demonstrate that, we're going to answer the same question, that one that we just asked about dealing with a wide range of people, and we're going to answer it three ways. One as the customer service rep, then as their manager, and then at a director or executive level. So we'll take turns. You take the rep.
All right. Well, in my previous role in customer service for a utility company, I dealt with a range of customers, from individuals who received government assistance to pay for their utilities to individuals with 12,000 square foot homes, businesses, schools, and hospitals. I maintained a 99% customer satisfaction rating by making sure to listen to the customer carefully and really trying to have a genuine conversation with them rather than just following the script. Even though I couldn't always give them exactly what they wanted every time, I made sure that they understood why and they had a solution that they were at least happy with, even if it was a compromise.
So the wide range of customers there was a bunch of, people who would have single utility bills. So. Okay, and then the manager. So a manager answer would be, our customer service reps came from a wide variety of backgrounds, which reflects our customer base. I maintained the highest retention rate amongst the customer service teams by making time each week to have a one-on-one with each representative and allowing them to go first with questions and issues or discussions that they wanted to have. My team really appreciated knowing they'd have the opportunity each week, and it meant that I could more effectively assign work and special products according to their interests, which was a win-win for all of us. So there, the wide range is the people I was managing.
Right, exactly. And quick note, even in hypotheticals, managers who do one-on-ones have higher retention.
Exactly. It's true.
And then the customer service director answer would sound like this. We provide electricity service for the whole of the city, from individual homes to businesses, schools, and hospitals. This means there is a great deal of scrutiny of our service from local government, utility regulation, community groups, and the press. Anytime there is an issue with our service, we form a war room. Our first action is to prepare standard answers for our customer service representatives that allow them to give the right answer to the different customer groups and answers about what's happening and our plans to rectify it for each of the scrutinizing groups. In the case of the recent 24-hour outage, I gave briefings to those groups every 30 minutes, even when we had no news. It was important to ensure that the message was consistent and targeted to the group. The level of technical detail required for each, for example, is of course different. Strategically, we carried out a hot wash after the event. We determined that whilst previous improvements to our process had worked well, the turnover in the community groups meant that we didn't have sufficiently deep relationships for them to really trust us. We are developing a plan to mitigate that issue in the future, and in the meantime, I'm visiting at least one community group each month.
It's amazing how the same question gives you different answers.
Absolutely.
And the customer service rep can't give the manager's answer because they don't have that experience, and the manager can't give the director's answer because they don't have that experience. So as a manager or a director, you might expect that you're going to be asked about strategy or managing teams because that's the different perspective of your role. But it doesn't need to be asked because it comes out naturally in the answers to simpler questions. So as both Andrew and I are previously HR and interviewing people, it's way easier to use the same questions, simple questions, and then expect different answers than ask a director, for example, how did you deal with the community groups and, in updates or whatever, or finding some more complex question when you can ask the easier one.
Yeah, and just a quick aside here, Wendy, one of the projects that I was involved in my previous life was we were going through to gather questions and kind of solidify or make more consistent our recruiting and interviewing process. And in that, what we did was we determined questions that we could ask at every level, at the individual contributor, supervisor, frontline supervisor, manager, director, and even vice president level. But keeping the same questions, we talked through what would make for a good answer at each level. And we talked through, and one of the things we talked through was the scope, right? I mean, is it limited in scope? Because we would expect that from an individual contributor, but we wouldn't expect that from a vice president.
Yeah. So it's completely laziness.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So those questions might still be asked if somebody had more, who was less lazy than me or Andrew. And in some places, they do have different questions for different levels. The consistency thing, because recruiting and interviewing is such a fraught process, legally. A lot of the time, companies will standardize things in order to prevent managers going off the reservation or going off on their own, which they have a tendency to do. So a lot of the times you will get, here's 50 standard questions and you can choose any one of them.
Right.
So you might be asked more complex questions, but you will already have the answers if you prepare answers to the more basic questions. So you can almost guarantee there'll be a customer service question in any role that has anything to do with customer service or managing customer service. But if you were asked as a director, how do you translate operational learning into strategic projects? You can use the same answer that you just used. So the operational learning was we didn't have a good relationship with community groups, and the strategic project was to be more in touch with them in the future and work out how to do that. So you already have that answer in the answer about a wide range of people.
Right. And I would say if there is, or if there's likely to be any difference or any differentiating factor in questions at a higher level, it's going to be questions about leadership, right? And that's where we recommend, part of this cast is we recommend that you prepare answers to questions about leadership. Individual contributors are probably not going to have many questions about leadership, but certainly supervisory roles, managers, directors will. There are some activities that are unique to director or executive roles. While leadership can happen at all levels of the organization and doesn't require role power, if you're familiar with us, you've heard our guidance on 3 types of power and 1 to rule them all. Mm-hmm. You're most likely to be asked questions about it at a director or executive level in those interviews. The question, what's your work style, becomes what's your management style, and then what's your leadership style as your interviews become more senior. Fortunately, the answer is easy. Pick 2 to 4 themes that encapsulate the way that you lead through each or through some key moments, and have examples for each.
It's a 2-line answer because there is actually a podcast for that called How to Answer the Leadership Question. You can get the whole answer. It's just more complete. It's not any different to that, but it's more complete.
Hey folks, if you're learning from manager tools and career tools, and maybe even executive tools, whether you're an individual contributor or manager or not, don't forget that you play a role in our marketing. We don't spend any money on marketing. We think our satisfied customers are our marketing department. And one way you could help us is to mention us to your boss. If you're a manager, mention us to a director, mention us to HR, and tell them what a good experience and how valuable we've been to you. And maybe that will lead to a client visit where we come on site with you or do a virtual event, or just tell a friend that you're benefiting from your experience with our work, whether you're paying us or not, because that's how we're going to grow. And our goal is to make every manager effective and every professional productive. And the more people that hear us, the more likely we are to do that. So thanks for being part of our marketing department.
So another area where you might get questions that are different to those in at lower levels is finance. So uniquely in the company, executives have to understand finance in a different way. So a manager has to understand their budget or their cost of goods sold for the product they're selling, but an executive has to understand the company finances as a whole. So that means things like being able to read the profit and loss statement and the balance sheet, understanding where the revenue sources are and the balance of different streams and why you might want to change them, understanding costs and how they're justified in the generation of revenue, understanding tax, understanding public reporting, like what do we have to do in the way of public reporting and how do I do that? And then basic benchmarks like cost of labor versus revenue and other general economic principles. So that kind of bigger picture finance thing is an executive level thing.
Yeah. And I think of this as, Mark has said several times about executives, they have to start seeing not just the internal workings of the organization, right, but how their organization fits within the greater context of the industry or society, right, the external environment. And I think of this as kind of a stepping stone to that. When you talk about finances, being able to look at the company's finances and know where your division sits, right? Mm-hmm. Knowing where your division is either contributing or not contributing, right? If you're the division that's holding the organization back, it's important to know that and know why and be able to point to that because other people are looking at that, namely the CFO, right? And so better to get ahead of that than be asked questions and be caught flat-footed. Yeah.
And a lot of this stuff is really easy to learn. There's no reason to wait until you're an executive or a director to learn this stuff. You might not be able to get your company's financial data, but there's a lot to learn from similar publicly available data and the commentary thereof and online and offline learning. I mean, if you just read the Wall Street Journal, it'll tell you this company announced its results. This product line was doing well. This one was done. This is how that's affected by the industry. And you can start to get an understanding of those bigger economic drivers and how they affect different companies in different ways.
Yeah. I mean, if you happen to work for a publicly traded company, right, that's going to be very easy, or at least readily available for you to see more in terms of the finances, but not just those finances for your company, but where your company sits in the industry, and have a lot more data and context for sure. In fact, it's probable that you'll have more access to financial data in your company than you think. Most of us assume that financial data is confidential, but because of that, we don't ask the questions. We about what we're able to see, what we can, look at. And you can ask your manager if you might see their budget in order to learn more about it. As a manager, you could ask your finance contact to maybe explain more about how your budget fits into that of the broader company, or how they would report on your budget and what the financial terms that they use mean. That's all really great to help you understand where you fit and make better day-to-day decisions.
And a lot of the time, I've found that people are desperate to tell you about their job and how and how they're affecting the company and how they see it and how they understand it. As a recruiter, I used to go around different departments and I'd be like, okay, so what do you do and how does it work? And that my favorite tidbit of information is in a finance department. I used to work for BAE Systems, and they have huge amounts of cash. And it's actually really difficult to park cash in banks overnight. You have to actually go find someone who's willing to do it for you. And I would never have learned that if I didn't go there and say, hey, tell me about your job and why is it hard or why is it easy and what do you like about it? And, if you've got if you're a manager and you have a budget and you have a finance contact and you go to them and say, I want to understand more about this, they will put time aside to tell you, because you understanding it makes their life easier, but also they just want to tell you how smart they are.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. In my previous life, I worked for a publicly traded company, and when we had our earnings calls, the CFO so every property had a CFO, and then there was a CFO for the larger organization just because of the volume each building did. And the CFO of our property, when we had the earnings call, he hosted just in a training room, basically just listen to the earnings call with the CFO. And it was kind of an open door thing. And I was like, oh, that's awesome. So I started going, and there were a few other people there, but they were sitting there like it was an obligation. And I remember the first one, I just said, hey, what was that ratio that I heard? I don't know what that means. And the CFO who was sitting there just kind of like, not bored, but just kind of sitting there because he knew all this stuff. He was well prepared and nobody was asking him questions. So I asked him that one question about some weird ratio that I had never heard of. His face lit up. He got up, he went to the whiteboard. He was like explaining things. It was amazing because they do, like everyone does. They love, if you know, and we've talked about this, I think a little bit, especially like high Cs, right? High Cs are not necessarily, the people that are communicative in terms of certain things, but when they know what they're talking about and they're an expert, they will share, right? And it's great.
I can't believe that people passed up on the opportunity to listen to the earnings call with the CFO.
It's unreal.
If that happens in your company, you should be there. That's like, no-brainer, as they say.
Yes, absolutely.
I can't believe anybody would not do that. Okay. And the last one is prepare answers to questions about strategy. And we put this one last because it's the one area we probably didn't have to tell you to prepare, because everybody expects questions about strategy at a director and an executive level. That's the one piece everyone's expecting to be asked, and yet it's actually the least important part of the interview. Let's say you are interviewing for a director level at a consumer goods company. So somewhere like Procter & Gamble, where they make things that people buy in Walmart, amongst others. You could assume, probably correctly, that you'll get a question about increasing market share for a particular product, right? Because that's what consumer goods run on.
Right.
So you would answer something like this. So to increase market share of teddy bears, I'd first survey the customers so I can find out why they buy our teddy bears or teddy bears from other companies or teddy bear alternatives. And then I'd develop a marketing campaign to let people know that a teddy bear is the perfect first day of school gift, as well as for birthdays. And I would make sure it hit the points that were revealed in the survey. And I'd also investigate teddy bear adjacent markets like dolls.
Yeah. And there's nothing, remarkable about that answer. Any sensible person would want to get more information about consumers and their use of the product before they developed a strategy. Michael Porter described the generic expansion strategies for products in 1980, and the model has been part of Business 101 and Marketing 101 courses ever since. In fact, when the everyday consumer can probably describe increasing market share by widening, even the everyday consumer can probably describe the increasing the market share by widening the product range, having experienced the development of Oreo cookies from the basic sandwich to the double stuff, mega stuff, the most stuff varieties, like, vanilla Oreos. There's all sorts of different, there's an assortment, and it's clear that you can take over a wider range. You can appeal to more customers just by expanding your assortment.
Yeah. And anybody in Walmart would be able to show you that. So an interviewee, even an internal one, rarely has the knowledge to propose a doable, novel strategy. You are not going to astound the interviewer with your insight and creativity for the answer to this question. You're just not. You don't have the information, and you don't know what they've already tried. Mm-hmm. So you could come up with something brilliant that's either not doable or they've already tried it. And even if we gave you the benefit of the doubt and we say you're the one candidate who can do this, if you can't give good answers to the basic interview questions, like tell me something you're proud of, and how do you get on with other people, and all those questions that we read earlier, questions that you've been asked in every interview you've ever had, you will not be hired, because your brilliance and effort in developing a strategy, your brilliance at strategic level or developing a strategy doesn't matter if you can't get on with people and get work done through them, if you can't get results, if you can't communicate, all of those things. You have to be a really special person. It's kind of like Einstein, right? Einstein got away with being a flake, as it were, of not managing his time well, of not managing his environment well, of not being easy to work with, because he came up with the theory of relativity. Right. Unless you're Einstein, you have to do all of those things that we all have to do in order to work in an organization. And you're so unlikely to have this brilliant strategy and not need all of those things. And if you do have a brilliant strategy and you can't work with people and you're super competitive, you're probably an entrepreneur and you're developing your own company.
No,
because those kind of people can't work with other people and they can't work for someone. So.
Yeah.
So like so many things in manager tools and career tools, it's the boring basics that count and not the moment of genius. Sad, but true.
Yeah.
Thanks, Andrew.
Thanks, Wendy.
That's all for this week. We'll be back next week with a new topic. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.